An event listener is an important piece of ActionScript code. It basically sets up a scenario in our program to where a block of code will execute if only a particular event is met. In this case, we will be using a button to program an event listener. And it makes sense because the button will execute its code once it's clicked, and that is where the event listener will come in. And I think this is a good basic example for those who are beginning to work with ActionScript. If you want to look at the finished code at any time, you can open up the work file 0206 _ event listener. So I've jumped ahead a little bit here just to save us some time. I've made a new document, and what I did here was I made a movie clip, just a simple rectangle with the text "click me" in it. And again, the aesthetics don't really matter in this case. And I named it MC Button with a linkage name MC Button. And all of that should seem familiar since we've been doing similar stuff up to this point. And I've also created a layer, an actions layer, which has a blank frame. So now, once we have all those elements in play, we'll just go to Window and Actions. And now we will begin the code process. And we'll create a variable, and this should be pretty familiar at this point. And I'll name the variable myButton. And then a colon, and then we will refer to the button in the library. So MC Button equals new MC Button, and then 2 parentheses, and then a semicolon. Pretty easy. So now we need to define, of course, the position of the button since it's being taken from the library. So myButton.x equals, let's do about 280, and then a semicolon. And then, of course, the Y properties as well must be defined. So we'll put in 200 and a semicolon. And of course, finally, we need to add the child. So add child myButton. And then the parentheses are closed off, followed by a semicolon. So now we'll just add a couple of lines here just to separate the code out. And this is where the event listener comes in. We've defined the variable. We're saying, okay, here's the variable. It's referring to the movie clip in the library. Now we need to create an event where this movie clip is going to do something. It's going to listen out for something to occur. So myButton dot add event listener. And make sure it's a small a and then a capital E and a capital L. And you'll, of course, know you did it right when it turns a color. So, in parentheses, we will now have mouse event, because even though we're going to be doing mobile games later on that don't use the mouse, this is just a test for us right now. And this is going to be a mouse event that the event listener is listening out for. In this case, it's going to be a click. So dot click. And then right here, we're going to define the function. So we'll just name it click button. Basically, we're saying, okay, if this happens, you go to click button. And we're going to define click button below. First, though, since we are making a button, and this won't be the case with every piece of code we do with an add event listener because we're not always going to be making buttons with add event listeners, we will need to define this variable as a button. So in this case, myButton dot button mode equals true, and then a semicolon. So now we define the function. So function click button. Again, we defined it right up here. And then in parentheses, it's going to be an event, colon, and then it's going to be a mouse event. And as you can see, when I'm typing this out, we kind of get a list here of different things we can put in for this. And we have mouse event right here, so let's just go ahead and double click on that. You can see when I do this, it imports a mouse event for Flash to reference, and that's fine. That happens when we are programming. So we'll close off that parentheses and then create a bracket. Whenever you have a function, when you define a function or you execute a function, you need to put basically what it does in brackets. So we have a bracket, we hit enter, Flash will automatically put in that second bracket for us. So now we'll enter in trace, parentheses, and we will, of course, put some stuff in quotation marks. So I was clicked. Just like that. And you've done a trace statement before. That was basically the first ActionScript code we typed out. So this will be a good test for us then to see what the trace statement does if it appears when we execute the code. So now that we have all the code out, we can test it just by using Control Enter, or you can go to Control Test Movie Test if you wish. And the button appears on the stage, so that part works. We can click, and I think my ActionScript panel is covering it up. Yep, there it is. The code worked because the trace statement appeared. So basically it listened out for when we click on the button, and once we clicked, it executed the code, which was simply a trace statement. And every time we do it, you can see it makes another trace statement. So that works out. And that is just a basic example of what an event listener can do.